right. Well, welcome everybody to the May Maker Roundtable. We're excited to have some guest speakers today, and I'm going to let Ken introduce them.
Yeah, and this is going to be very brief. But I met Scott and Mark at the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference just a couple of months ago. They were in the exhibit hall, and I was wandering through and thought, gee, that's interesting what they're into. My experience with college students getting involved in design of AT for people with disabilities has always been spotty at best and disappointing in general. So I asked them if they were successful in what they did, and their claim, in 20 years, their claim was they were very successful. And so I said, well, then you must be doing something special. And I'd love for you to come here and tell us what it is you're doing so that we can glean out the pieces of what you're doing that are making, that are getting useful, effective AT to your end user. And with that, I'll turn it over to them.
All right, great. Thank you, Ken, and thanks everybody for having us on today. I'm Mark Robbins. I am Executive Director of QL Plus, which is the short version of Quality of Life Plus. Scott Huyvaert is with us. He's one of our program directors. I'll tell you a little bit about the organization, what we do. Scott will talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of what we do, and certainly be happy to start a conversation, take questions at any time as well. QL Plus started in 2009, so we've been around for a little while. We have grown to include 21 universities across the country, and they're big schools, small schools. We have like Virginia Tech or University of Colorado, San Diego State. We have small schools like Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, Grace College that just started an engineering program, and others. But really our mission, our goal is to partner with college engineering students who will design and build assistive devices for veterans and first responders with disabilities. So that's kind of our niche market, is working with those two groups. But it's very robust and always have something to do. This year we have, with our 21 schools, we had 50 projects that we worked on. This is a pretty cool time of year for us because all the projects are coming to completion, and we get to visit the various schools and they demonstrate, the students demonstrate what they did. One of our, the thing that we find that kind of weaves through all this is that we have these veterans and first responders, and probably just like everybody who deal with disabilities, is they want to maintain an active lifestyle. They want to continue doing things that they've done before. They want to pick up new things they hadn't done before and maybe have new opportunities. So a lot of our projects will go around, kind of work their way around through various sports. It could be golfing, skiing, biking, hunting, transportation of bikes, kayaks, and things, and how to get them from the ground to the roof of your car if you have limited mobility. We do all sorts of things like that. So they really come up with some ingenious ideas. And for us, the process is, and I won't jump in too much into the Scott stuff here, but we identified veterans and first responders who want to work with us. The schools will select the projects that work best for the resources they have at their schools, and then it's a team of students that take on each project. So the team could be anywhere from 2 to 5 to 6 students, I guess, in most cases. It's part of their senior capstone project. So they're getting graded on this. It's an academic year long. So the fall starts with design of the project, and then the spring is usually the build of the project and demonstrations of it all. So we do all this with a small staff of 5. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm outside of Washington, D.C. Scott's in Colorado Springs. We have staff in Baltimore, Southwestern Virginia, and the Cincinnati area as well. And from that, we kind of manage all the 21 schools and the 50 projects we have going on at any time. So with that kind of background, I'll turn things over to Scott, and he can talk a little bit about more of the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, so as Mark said, we kind of revolve around the academic year. Some of our schools have different schedules, but they all are relatively the same. And it's really just basic project management, setting timelines, setting goals and logistics, materials acquisition, and then accountability of the team members. And I mean, the higher the accountability and communication rate, the higher success rate we have. And it's really that simple. I've taken my military experience of being in charge of 6 people to 30 people to a battalion and kind of incorporated that into organizing the different teams. So it really comes down to communication. Without good communication, the projects tend to fail. That's when there's gaps. When you allow those gaps to creep, that's when we've seen less success. So I kind of apply that to every single project. So the more I interact with the teams and the end user, which is critical, especially when you're using like wearable devices. So your wearables, you want to have a lot of interaction between the teams for fitment and comfort and actual usability at the end. And since we do one-off prototypes and not manufacturing, we tend to see a lot of success because of the buy-in from the team, because it has a direct effect on the end user. That individual gets to use that device. And technology is a little more limited in the universities than the private sector. I have seen that, but we have a lot of support from private sector to accomplish that. We've had mentors come in from, different organizations, engineering firms that assist in, kind of point them in the right direction. We don't want to tell them how to do it, but we do want to get them, to do what we want them to do. So that's typically how we operate from fall to spring.
May I ask a question here? And I'm sorry if I missed this. You mentioned these student groups. What disciplines?
So we work, I would say the majority is mechanical engineering. However, a large amount of our projects are multidisciplinary. And so the universities, depending on their structure, is where we place the teams with the most effective university. So we'll do a screening of the, what is needed by the individual, what is their goal to accomplish. And if it's solely mechanical, I know I'm going to be more successful with university A over university B. If it's more biomedical, I know that right now in my region, if I get a biomedical project, the first person I'm talking to is in UT Austin, because their biomed is much more capable than, and this isn't to belittle any universities, but like sending it to mechanical at Grace, like Mark said, is a smaller college. They have their total student participation is something like 27, 28. It's a very, very small department. So knowing that they were that limited, I'm not going to send a complex biomechanical project to them. We're seeing a lot now with app support. So a lot of our projects are having apps built in conjunction with them. We did a project last summer that was essentially a charging station that worked around the Otterbach knee system. So anybody familiar with the Otterbach German knee that has a microprocessor and a lot of technology in it, we were able to communicate with the knee to give us feedback of usage, battery life, all that stuff on a display while charging it for the end user. So we're seeing a lot of.
So Scott,
yeah.
Scott, so I'm going to guess I know where Bill's going with that question, but what I hear is engineering, engineering, engineering. Yes. What I didn't hear was anybody on the health services side of things, people who would actually know more about range of motion and other issues that these individuals have.
We do have, we bring in assistance where needed as far as subject matter experts of physio and any kind of, like I could give you an example. We're doing a guitar this summer. Well, I'm bringing in a music therapist that works directly with quads and paras in order to get the most effective guitar for that type of disability. So we do bring in subject matter experts when necessary.
And so how do you decide what subject matter experts to bring in? Do you have a team of people who have broad experience and can say, oh, we need this plus this plus this? Or do you just you leave it to the school to figure that out? How do you do that?
I don't leave it to the school because they pretty much stay in their individual lanes when it comes to the projects. You know, there's not a, we create the co-working environment, you know, more than the university. They'll give us the resources, but then we kind of organize it.
Is that healthy? Is that healthy for the university administration and faculty to be kind of disconnected from the inner workings of these things?
I wouldn't say there's a disconnect because for like Boulder, each team is assigned a faculty advisor that attends, that's just as hands-on as we are. Well, you know, give or take, but if we're needed, we bring in an outside source because we've brought out, like we've partnered with companies local to the universities or not that are able to contribute and help out. And we've seen a lot of success with that because they're eager to support the universities and QL Plus.
Okay. I mean, so Bill, if that wasn't what you were thinking of, please say
it. It wasn't exactly, but it's along the same lines. And I think it's a good point. I think part of where these types of programs, when they're just run within a university without a kind of third-party group like QL Plus, where you have the faculty member running the capstone course, you have the students, and then somehow you find community members who have a need, right? I think that's the more traditional model. And the student group is assigned to work with the community member. They may or may not have a faculty member with them at the time. They're generally engineering students or some sort of health profession student, not usually a truly interdisciplinary group between those. And so you wind up with really siloed expertise or siloed lack of expertise. So actually everything you described, Scott, sounds like a real, there's a better phrase for this, but what's coming to mind is a real value add.
Absolutely.
In terms of being able to match the needs of the individual with what's the right group to be able to work toward this project. And so having worked with some of these engineering capstones here at our institution, if you're talking mostly MEC-E students, right? The majority of those capstone projects here in Middle Missouri are going to be for manufacturing companies that need a new piece of equipment, some new piece of agricultural equipment. And maybe one student group a year has some interest in a rehabilitation approach or a piece of assistive technology. And the closest they can get to a subject matter expert is me, who has no engineering background and doesn't practice clinically. So I see a lot of value there. I do think, to Ken's earlier point, I don't know that it's so much your problem as the individual institution's problem. Being able to pair those engineering students with various health profession students would be beneficial to both sets of students and to the people they're working with.
Yeah, we just completed a project in Florida. So it came from Colorado. The project was a underwater blood pressure cuff. So all of our vital signs can be read underwater as normal, except for blood pressure, because you're changing the atmospheric pressure. It's the opposite of going to space. You're going into more pressure down below. So working with a nonprofit that revolves around veterans and diving, they brought us the problem because they couldn't tell when individuals were experiencing spikes in their vital signs, showing some kind of agony, some kind of distress, because in a para or a quad, or depending on the disability, they might not present it physically the same as an able-bodied person. So we tried to do that in Colorado and learned very quickly that this was not the location to do this project. Christy, one of our teammates on the East Coast, she works with South Florida. Well, they've got a vast diving department and engineering department that's very well-versed in underwater things. So we paired them with them. We brought in the dive team. The dive team had subject matter experts that worked with naval diving and things like that, that just, I mean, it was priceless. And they were much more capable than my team in the mountains. And it makes perfect sense. Like, nothing against the team in the mountains, but I'm asking them to go underwater. Well, that's a little tall, So we do have a selection. We have a method to our selection. We don't just, throw stuff at a wall and see if it sticks. So
it's interesting that you have multiple contacts at the university level. I think that there are two things you brought up that were different as well. One is your focus on project management. I think that's hugely missing from these other attempts at this. You have a year as well to work with. Many of these universities go with a single semester, and you can bring in engineering firms for consultation. Well, I tell you, that's hugely important to bring in somebody who actually knows the entire breadth of what's required to get something of value and something that's safe to use into use by someone. I think when I talked to you guys at CSUN, I said, so what do you do with projects that take more than a year? And you at the time said, well, we don't have any problem kind of bringing two teams together, a handoff between the teams. Is that real?
Yeah. So that relies heavily on me more than the faculty, because my personal experience, once the summer hits, it's out of sight, out of mind for the faculty and the students. They graduate, the faculty's already on vacation, and it's like two sheets to the wind. And then they get back in, mid-summer, they start asking us for project details and submissions, and then we, start the new academic year. Should we miss the mark on a project? So I have a unique department in Colorado at Golden School of Mines. They have a department that doesn't revolve around the end of academic year. So I'm able to keep those projects going. And the continuity is that it's not always a senior working on it. I might have a sophomore or a freshman and 4 or 5 seniors. So as they transition to their next semester, I'm able to keep that continuity. And that's worked for some of our more complicated projects or something that just doesn't quite make it. And we have experience, we're not 100% every single time, because sometimes, the past 3 years, which we're getting over now, material acquisition was a nightmare. Getting electronic components was a nightmare. So we've had to revisit some of our projects due to that. But as far as like continuing the projects on, I have seen complete redesigns that kind of reset the project, and that could be beneficial. They might have come up with a better idea, but we have been able to transition those in some way and not just give up. And maybe like we found in Colorado, maybe that specific project shouldn't be here, and maybe it should be somewhere else.
So as a person who's been in engineering for 3 decades, I can tell you that it is on the rare side for an engineer to work on something that is brand new. Typically, you're coming in to enhance something that already exists or rework something that's no longer meaning it, or you're going to end of life something. So creating this mindset in engineering students that your job is to come in and create magic from scratch is unreal. That just doesn't happen in the real world. So I think learning how to pick up work that someone else has started and carry it forward, and knowing what it means to do that, what information do you have to gather, is valuable in the real world. And I would hope that companies that are hiring would be impressed by the fact you're able to do that, because that's most of what you're going to do as an engineer.
Yeah, we just recently had a rollerblade project out of Colorado. This one's one of my favorites just because it's fun. We had a 24-year-old female Marine, below the knee amputee right leg. She is a very active person. She's an outdoor person and just wants to be an active 24-year-old again. She wanted to learn how to rollerblade. Not that she necessarily skated much before her injury, but she lives near Venice Beach now, and there's a lot of people on skates, and she said, I want to do that. So the first team I had in Colorado never got to a solid prototyping. They just couldn't get ahead of themselves. And we tried to do as much, and we started that project in December. So it kind of ran into the spring, and then the students, the majority of them did graduate. So we had a semester that was kind of lackluster, and we picked it up in the fall and delivered it this spring, and it's fantastic. And they were able to take
power on.
Sorry, they were able to take it and transition it. So that's my personal example that I had recently.
Can I ask a question?
A really great example of I always think that you can start a project and go down a road, and because that's where your target is at the end of that road, you forget to look for other options. And if you don't hit it, I think transitioning and somebody else gets to re-examine, is that the right road to get to the target, and can go in a different direction. I think that's great.
And we're not building a better mousetrap. We're not building a widget that kind of has no meaning. So fortunately for me, that makes my job way easier, that the end user really means something to the teams. They usually connect because I put the end user in communication with the team as early as possible. And we try to create that interaction and accessibility to the end user. And that really gives the team a sense of buy-in. We took third place overall the entire engineering last year with Boulder for a mechanical finger. It was the tip of an index finger from like the first knuckle. I mean, not an impressive visual project to take third place over the entire engineering department, but it was efficient. It was very emotional because the end user was there, and he said, I haven't been able to pick something up with my finger since the late 70s, and it's, it had the story, it had the team. It was the right team. We got very fortunate that we had a passionate team. And that you felt the connection between the end user and the team. They wanted to do good by him.
Nice. And so just it sounds like, but just to clarify, somebody can be identified in Idaho and they could pair up with a team in Virginia. Okay.
Yeah. The only time it's very difficult to do distance like that is when it's a wearable. When it is a prosthetic wearable, that I try to get those as local as possible. We've got an upcoming project, a friend of mine, Gary, he's a right leg, right arm amputee, and he is a kayaker. And so we're going to create a mechanical solution to his kayak so he can paddle with one arm, but get the effect of both sides paddling. So, that's going to have to be local. If I tried to do that on the other side of the country, it's so specific to his fit that it would probably be, in fact, it would be a challenge. I mean, I just don't see it working if it wasn't local. So we take a lot of things into consideration when assigning.
And
we also, let me jump in on that also, is that if we have, we call them challengers, the veterans and the first responders who work with. If the challenger needs to get to campus, that's something that QL plus pays for to make sure they can get there. So the closer is the better. But again, sometimes somebody else is better suited. One school is better suited than another for it. And so it works out well like that. But it's, it's not the driving force, because matching them up with the right program is better than having somebody just can't really handle the project.
Shannon just asked a question about the designs at the end of the challenge. So when we wrap them up and we do the product delivery to the end user, we also archive any kind of files, reports, CAD, any design. It could be, crayons on paper. I don't care. We'll archive everything, and then we have it for reference should we do a projects similar to a past project, something where the sharing of knowledge would benefit the team. The one thing I will say about the universities is, and to speak on what Ken had said earlier, very rarely are you going to create something out of nothing. However, the capstone, they want you to be innovative. They want you to create something because it is their senior capstone. So
that's a problem with the definition of the capstone, as far as I'm concerned. Again,
yeah,
nothing to do with engineering. Damn it,
sure.
you're teaching engineering students here, right? So teach them about engineering.
Yeah,
And
I
you and I have
wholeheartedly
gone
agree.
back and forth on this a lot. And actually, I have a question about that as well. And I'm in an engineering program and an OT program, so I get to go through both kinds of academic accreditations, and so that's constantly on my mind. Has your, I guess, every engineering program has to have a capstone program that's part of their ABET accreditation, and I'm pretty sure that that's where the idea that it has to be something new comes from. Really, is that in order to be accredited by ABET, you need to have them do this capstone project that meets certain requirements. Have any of the schools you've been working with gone through ABET accreditation since you started working with them?
I don't know that answer, to be honest with you. We don't get involved in that part of it, so they haven't brought it up to us.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
I had another question. Whenever I hear projects that involve lots of mechanical, lots of special hardware, and lifting large objects, the first thing that comes to my mind is safety and liability. How do you handle those problems?
Absolutely. That has to be safe. There's no compromising on safety, in my opinion. Especially working with the disabled community. I've participated in pre-medical screening and treatment, point of contact treatment while deployed, and recovery treatment. That was my military career. I medically separated people from the military due to injury at the end of my career. So I've seen all phases of treatment and a wide variety of disabilities. And the last thing that we're going to do is make their life more difficult or put them in a compromising position. So, and the faculty that's when they get really involved, is the safety aspect. We do have a contract with the user and the universities, and it lays out all the liabilities, and they have to be comfortable with those in order to participate. Because
where does the liability lay in your contract? Is it with the university?
No, I believe it's on the end user, not having the contract in front of me right now. But they understand that if they accept the project as it is at the end, that they are accepting the liability of use.
So that sounds like a very lawyerly approach. Unfortunately, it puts the responsibility on the person who has the least experience with safety. I would have hoped that the university would have responsibility, and your organization as well, only because you can bring in these third-party engineering firms who probably do have safety engineers.
And I don't know if you've ever worked with University General Counsel, but they are not taking liability for anything. That would be a non-starter.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I get your point, but I don't see any other possible solution there that any school would agree to.
Yeah, that's just sad.
Yeah.
Something we've had luck with is in Pennsylvania, our Tech Act organization has their own maker space and does things, and they have a liability process, and a request process. So what we can do is the end user we work with can request something through the Tech Act organization, and then the Tech Act organization, we give the device to the Tech Act organization, they take liability, give it to the end user.
Yeah, and that's where I do see the other thing that you said, Ken, there was, universities or your organization, Scott and Mark, we have on other projects, I've worked with other institutions that with other projects have partnered with a nonprofit or not-for-profit in the community that was willing to accept that liability. I think in their perspective, because for that project, they realized there was no reasonable expectation that anyone was ever going to sue them. The actual danger inherent in that type of device for that specific project was so low and was so exaggerated by council that they felt comfortable taking that on, knowing it was never going to cost them anything. I don't assume that's always the case with the devices that these student groups are working on. So I see why that would not necessarily be a good approach for you all. I'm also curious about the whole intellectual property side of this. So when working with student groups, every institution I've worked at, the rule has been that any IP created by undergraduates was owned by those undergraduates automatically in the course of a class, and anything by a graduate student was owned by the university. Sorry, Kyle.
I'm fortunate enough that in Colorado, the agreements with the universities that we own the IP, and actually San Diego is the same way. We do have different relationships per university.
Gotcha.
And Mark can speak more on the East Coast with his experience with the other project managers. I've been fortunate enough that all the IP, and in Texas, our Texas IP has belonged to my QL Plus as well. So I haven't had to deal with that, fortunately.
And so then going back to Shannon's question earlier about what you do with the designs at the end of the challenge, is there any thought of either open sourcing those or commercializing those? And I know you're creating these as one-off things, but they're potentially beneficial to other people. How do you track that IP thing, and what do you do with them?
Yeah, some things we think have some real value. The organization in the past hasn't really looked at trying to market it or license it or anything like that, but I've been starting to get into that. I need some guidance and advice on it, because I've talked to an IP lawyer, and we'd like to. I think there's some projects we're working on now, and maybe in the last couple of years, it may have more value than just the one-off. And so, yeah, we'd like to get more into that. But at the very least, we are, as we have MOUs with each of the universities, we provide everybody with the opportunity to say, university, do you want your share? Students, do you want your share? QL Plus, do you want your share? And then each school will handle it as they do. And Scott's right, most of the schools are happy to pass it on to the students, their IP rights, because it's just, they're happier seeing it work like that. We only work with undergraduates, so I don't know what happens on the graduate level. But yeah, I say
again that I think, my goodness, you're a university, you're probably a public university, and you think you need to have IP. Goodness gracious. That's another sad story.
So I agree there, Ken, but having run into this, I've seen it play out with undergraduates where a device was created in one of these capstone courses where there was no signed agreement in the beginning as to who might own any potential IP. The instructor in the course thought that they had done most of the work and carried it forward over the course of several iterations of different student groups, and eventually had a product that was to be commercialized. And they went and privately tried to do that. And students came back to the university and said, no, we created that. And so in that case, it was the rules. I think it's rare that the university does this. The rules were put in place to protect the students from the university taking advantage of them.
Right. And how much of that IP belongs to the person who was consulting on their own device? Great question.
Yeah, we define the IP agreements at the beginning of each semester and have them signed by the university and ourselves. So we have IP agreements. Yeah, it's very necessary, because we do, as Mark said, have a few products or projects that have the potential to go to product. And so whether that be a startup or a third-party manufacturer that's already established, that I don't know what that looks like because I'm not in that realm, but we have the potential, and we do structure it that we own the IP or not. And whether or not we take it or someone else does comes down to those agreements.
So you would have the option to make it open source if you chose.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That could be an option if we chose to.
Shannon had just put in the chat about the kayak, like the modifications for the kayak. I know that your project was very specific, but there could be modifications that would work for multiple people. But marketing something that is so specialized to like lower limb amputation, it would either cost tons of money per unit, or you'd have to make it.
And that's the problem with adaptive equipment in general. You can go to Walgreens and you can go to Walmart and get universally fit gloves and universally fit things, but it's so universal that how effective is it? Like there's a lot of the adaptive equipment companies, they either have to operate as a nonprofit or charge insane amounts for their equipment. I've purchased equipment from adaptive equipment companies to incorporate, and we contact them and make sure that it's all good. Hey, can we take your design and help university? And we make agreements with them too, because a lot of these are small companies that there's just no money in it. And I hate to say that, but and this was brought up I was at a Move United event last year, and they had a roundtable about that specific topic, availability of adaptive equipment. And everybody had grand ideas. I want adaptive equipment in every major retailer. Well, what are you gonna get, and who's gonna make it? Because I've had two of my soldiers get the exact same injury. They present in such a different way. There's just so much variation. But if you are to find something that's universal and could help a lot of people, hey, I think the thing about QL Plus is and this is solely my opinion, not Mark's, if we do find something worth manufacturing that could benefit people, I would gladly find a manufacturer to do it. And we can all get 10% of a pie or 0% of a pie. It doesn't have to be us, this is ours. And we're, I'm all about collaboration and growth.
Scott, what are you doing right now with your designs? Is there some place where they're exposed for people to pick up and run with?
From my experience, it's been internal conversations with university members that have those connections, or people that design some of our support engineering firms. I haven't actively sought that out.
But I mean, when you have the end of year projects and you own the IP, do you have a repository of that information?
We have. I mean, and this might be getting to a little bit where you're going, Ken, is on our website, we do have an archives that shows videos of a lot of the projects that our students work on. So if they produce a video at the end, which most of them do, we'll try to get up either on our website or YouTube channel, probably where it ends up. And just so people see the basics, but they don't get the details of it.
Where are the details? Do you keep them somewhere?
They're with us.
I'm sorry, they're in the repository?
Yeah, they're in our we have that data here.
So someone would have to contact you to get the details, and then you may or may not share them.
Yeah. And let me ask this, because I'm kind of new to that part of it. Is there a benefit? Should we make it open source and just start posting this stuff online, or are we creating problems for ourselves?
Well, that's your question. You have lawyers on staff. Apparently that's what you need around here, are lawyers. So they would answer that question. If you own the IP and you make it available, well, then you fall into where most DIY designers are. Mm-hmm. They make their stuff available, and then they pray that no one will sue them along the way.
Or you put in a liability statement upon download, you agree to this. So I've seen that where upon download, you agree for these plans, then you agree to you have to give credit, and we're not liable for what you do with it, kind of thing.
And the one thing I have heard from lawyers is all those liability statements are about worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah, anybody can get an idea and chase a patent without authorization. It's really simple to get around those. So you can put measures in place, but legally, as you're saying, and again, not a lawyer, but having seen some of it, there's a lot of loopholes.
So
well,
yeah,
another.
do you guys have lawyers on staff? Just curious.
Not on staff, on retainer.
Okay, well, I'd love to know the answer to that, because you guys are right. As a person deep into the DIY AT community, I'd love to know the answer to this question. How do you indemnify yourself against liabilities like this?
And you know, that idea of whether you open source all of your designs, or as Shannon pointed out in the chat, if it's a good design, right? It comes down to a philosophical one too, of, you know, where you fall on a spectrum of, do you believe that all knowledge should be free, right? And that everybody should benefit from this? Or also at the same time, it's potentially a way to sustain the organization. I don't know what your structure is or how you're funded, but 10% of a small pie could be enough to offset your web hosting costs for a year, right? Or
and that's really what
staff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where we've kind of entertained that in the past. It just we haven't really, I don't know.
It's hard and expensive to figure out.
Finding a willing manufacturer and going through that whole process is not, we would almost have to hire somebody to just do that, in my opinion.
Well, and so
you charge for your designs. That's it. Someone else has to do the manufacturing.
Yeah. If you know, if
we don't want to get into the manufacturing business. We're a nonprofit, so we'll keep our lane.
Also, is Rolex.
So, you know, if just a thought for you all to consider, if you're considering open sourcing things, but do want to insulate yourself a bit from that liability question, or don't want to be responsible for the long-term hosting and maintenance of open source projects like that, one of the favorites of this group that we talk about all the time is Makers Making Change. So a nonprofit that goes to great lengths to vet the things that are submitted to them, and then they host the design. They are responsible for any follow-up. They will occasionally reach out to the original creator of a thing for some guidance, but then you're not the one putting it out into the world. And theoretically, you're not the one getting sued if it breaks and someone gets injured.
So on that front, I have recently met someone who has connections in a company that's what they do. They buy the design. And so hopefully we do quarterly meetings with our organizations in Denver. And so we'll be coming up on our spring meeting, and our newest member of that team, she brought that to the table. So now that we're not so hectic with traveling and, you know, presentations and all that, we can sit down, and the summer's perfect time for me to be able to expand on that. So we like I said, it's in the works, but we just don't have it fully developed yet.
For a commercialization route, for
Correct.
Being able to sell the designs, and that's great. If the thought is open source, there are other directions to go there too. Or, you know, maybe some you think need to be open source, some you think are worth commercializing.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Bill, is that you're going to have some that will never be worth putting on the commercial market. You know, they're going to benefit 3 people in each state, but those 3 people are worth getting to. And so those designs, I think, would be the ones that would go to Makers Making Change, you know, because you're never going to make a profit. So why keep it to yourself, and why bother trying to monetize it? But yeah, the ones that are worth going to market, I don't think, you know, there's a person out there would say, you know, don't do it. Get the design out there. And if it goes to market, it'll hopefully get better publicity and, you know, help more people.
Yeah. Now that's definitely an area we've been looking at, and I'd like us to get into that, because I really think, kind of like Bill said, just every little bit will help us manage our finances. We're nonprofits, so we depend on donations and grants. And
Mark, do you all go to like the occupational therapy conference and the physical therapy conference where they've got the ATPs?
I know we have in the past. We haven't in the last year or so. But yeah, I think we have in the past.
Because I was just at a local one yesterday, and there were some interesting gadgets that they have there. And we were talking about like a changing table, and there was a small company, and they had like it's like a chair that slides into the tub. So it was like I saw a lot of unique smaller companies there that I've not seen at other conferences, because they're dealing with some specific mobility issues in the medical field. And I think that that would be an area to look at some of these smaller manufacturers, because when I was talking about like the need for a portable changing table kind of thing for adults and caregivers, they had never thought about that. So it's sometimes getting the ideas and the initial plans so that then they can kind of work out some of the ideas to make it more generalized for the population. Mm-hmm. So I would be really curious to see if there was some more networking opportunities with those ATP, state ATP, OTs, and PT programs.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I have a couple of questions here about your development cycle. So it seems to be very tied to a single capstone project, which in my head creates two issues. One is, number one, do you have to create any expectation on the part of the disabled individual about what it is they're going to get at the end of this? Because they might have overly high expectations. You're dealing with a bunch of engineering students. These are not seasoned people at all. So you're likely to get something that falls heavily into the prototype realm and very little into the, I can actually use this day to day. The other thing is, if all your support disappears at the end of the academic year, well, that's not very much like the commercial world. The commercial world, you have 5 years of support or whatever. Here, if you're having a problem with your device, how do you get this thing enhanced? How do you get it enhanced or repaired or whatever? Are you basically on your own at the end of the year?
So I know that expectation management is a huge part of what I do on behalf of the students and behalf on our challenger veteran first responders. But on behalf of our challengers, a lot of them, I would say all of mine are military. So we all have that common ground. I'm able to speak to them bluntly, directly, and plainly. And I tell them, we are going to do as good as we can by you, but this is also helping 5 to 7 students graduate college. So you're as much a part of the process as they are. This isn't, we're not just doing this so that you get this and there's no other aspect to it. You are part of the process. So I try to get the end user to have as much buy-in as well. And I tell them, we are going to give you the best that we possibly can. And if we fall short, we can readdress it. We can go a different route. We can go to a different university. That's day one, and we've had a lot of misconceptions about what we do. I've had service members and first responders call me and they're like, hi, I heard about your organization. I need new tires for my bike. Buy this for me. And it's like, no, that's not what we do. I had a guy ask me for like $10,000 worth of tires, literally. And it's like, sorry, that is not I can maybe point you in the right direction, but that's not what I do. I've had civilians contact me and they're like, hey, I've got a great design idea and I need this. And I can't help you, but I can find a resource for you. So I do expectation management from day one. Yeah.
So it sounds like the expectation you set for them is, hey, if you're not getting what you need at the end of this capstone project, we'll try to either get another capstone project involved, or we'll send to another university.
Or a continuation or a new university.
So they're not just going to hang out at the end.
Yeah, it's not just because, the semester ends doesn't mean that it's over. Okay. You know what I mean? So.
But what about Ken's point to the support? Like you said, you built apps. What happens when folks need support with something like that, or even the finger? Like, is there any route
So that is a difficulty, having, not having the support after the fact. So when we do get a project to completion that we're satisfied with, what I try to do to mitigate that is a complete parts list, complete diagrams, the most in-depth details of the process of how it was created, and then physical representation of like visuals and how-to manuals at the very least. And we have seen some benefit on that. The finger project, for example, they said, listen, this project's good and it works and he can wear it, but it would be much better if you were able to acquire these pressure fittings and get it, use a different material. It's going to last longer. And so they provided me with all the CAD files on that and all the specifics. And it helps. And, but to be honest with you, I really haven't had to deal with it all that much of, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. We haven't really hit that mark with some of the projects.
Do you have a sense of, do you go back and do follow-ups with your clients and say, are you still using that device? Is that device even usable anymore? Just to get a sense of abandonment or failure of the device.
I do like to know if it's in a closet collecting dust. We're
starting to do that more now.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I just talked to somebody a few weeks ago. I put in one of our recent newsletters that it's been, I think, 3-4 years since we worked on her project. And she says she still uses it. It still works and has adapted it for other things as well. So it's been good.
Do you have a sense of what percentage of your clients have that as their outcome?
No, because we didn't collect that before recently. So we're now just starting to do more of that now.
How long have you guys been around?
Since 2009, but I've been here just for 2 years, less than 2 years. So we're still sort of, figuring out some of these other parts as well.
And I started right after my military service in 2019. So I've only been on board for 4 years, just shy.
Yeah, another advantage of having the educational institutions you work with is people who do research. And so if you're interested in looking at those outcomes, both what if any benefit is there to the device, and is the device actually in use? People like Kyle Ann on this call, who's an occupational therapist who's doing a PhD looking at assessment around custom assistive devices. Probably a good type of person to be aware of, not to put her on blast. And actually, along those lines, I'm thinking on the health profession side, there are often capstone requirements there and small scale research projects that a lot of us do, that if you can partner with someone, figure out what the right measures are, collect them in an easy way online with something like a Qualtrics, and have a team who can work through the analysis of that for you, and help demonstrate the value of what you all do. Those would not be hard projects to do.
I think there's a question earlier about building capacity, how we do that. And one of our things is we're always seeking out new challengers, as veterans and first responders with disabilities who like to work with us. We're heavy into that right now because we're trying to get everything ready in the summer to launch things again in the fall. So we have a lot of contact with other nonprofits that work with people with disabilities. We work with a lot of veterans groups. We just get our stuff out everywhere we can. We've been working with the people through the Paralympic Committee and other sports groups and on, especially adaptive sports. So we're doing a lot of things in those areas, and just to try to build that. We find that if we approach a school that would like to join us, most of them are pretty enthusiastic about it. And adding schools is more a question of funding on our end than their desire to be part of it. So it's really seeking out the challengers is the thing that we focus on year round.
Hey, Scott, you say, it sounds like you do an awful lot of deciding who should be involved and when to bring people in and how to manage this. If you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, have you documented all this? And I'd say that tongue in cheek because I bet there are a lot of universities who'd love to have your list of decisions that have to be made and how to address them. And when you say, I got to move forward and involve these kind of people, do you write that down?
I mean, we have a monthly reporting system where we discuss those type of things internally.
But not
as far as
your internal knowledge base, you don't write that down.
No,
You
not.
probably have it. No, Jody would have it. She's our program director, and she's pretty anal about that stuff. So she's a.
I mean, things like saying, you know, this is one that's going to need an external engineering firm to consult. Those kind of things, those decisions you're making right there, Rich could use.
Well, we have to ask the universities and will they even allow it? Will they allow
for sure.
external mentor? Yeah, and if
I'm going to have to ask the university if I want to bring in this organization to consult, but I'm going to ask them under these conditions because we need it for these reasons. There's just a lot of knowledge you have that would be incredibly beneficial to other schools who aren't tied in with your audience. So you have a very specific audience. First responders and military. There are a lot of people with disabilities out there who don't fall into those two categories. And so they would be supported by other folks, but your knowledge would be of huge value.
So we have helped other people that are non-military or first responders by providing like Move United is just off the top of my head. They do that kind of stuff where they're able to help and connect the outside sources that we just don't have access to, or that we can't. That I don't want to say can't, but just don't currently serve. So we don't, you know, I try to help people that don't fall in our category as well if we can beyond it. But as far as like documenting the process, I can't say that we've done that.
Okay, just to bug in your ear then. That would be valuable.
Absolutely. And Shannon had a question. Gaming is huge also, or their projects on gaming equipment. So at the CSUN, Ken saw that Sony was there. They actually approached us. And I'm not saying we have a project with Sony, but that was the topic that was brought up specifically. And so we're, should they reach out to us and say, yes, we want to do a gaming project, I've got access to the Warrior Transition Battalion on Fort Carson, my old unit, that has I would call it a problem with gaming among soldiers, because it seems to be that's all they want to do. So especially while they're going through recovery, they're not doing their job per se. They're just recovering or being medically separated. Video games are a massive industry within the military.
It is, but it's a double-edged sword, because what we're seeing, and I have the research, is sometimes when you've got those recovery patterns where we're trying to promote that recovery, sometimes we don't want to get on the computer and do something, but if we can get them gaming, they start developing the motor patterns and the skills, and then we can use those gaming tools to get them back into like job placements and things like that. So we need to be working more on that engagement piece of it to get people employed into working. And you know, that addiction piece is a whole nother.
That's a whole other ball of wax. Yeah.
Another whole ball of wax. But there's some research now coming up that shows that gaming piece really facilitates in the rehab industry.
And my impression from Sony is that they want to enter the therapeutic realm with their equipment. That was the impression I got from Sony. So I would absolutely love to take on a project like that with them partnered and see what we could do. Now, I'm assuming if we were to do something like that, they would control a lot of the project, you know, as far as development, but we would.
They're seeing how much money, because of the, they're starting to see with the tools that are coming, how much interest is there, and they want to be on that bandwagon for
Absolutely. I know that when through my various travels along the world, we always had the newest and before most things were released to market. So, you know, we'd have the newest version of the PlayStation or the Xbox. They'd send it to us before we would go out and just kind of make sure that we had some kind of recreational activity.
That was in the rec department, but then the equipment actually driving the ship was the old archaic database program that was 10 years older than what they were using in the general public. So the right hand was, I'm a Navy veteran, so.
I was at Camp Buring when it was super built up and it was its own city, and it was amazing. And
that was their show and tell.
That's their show and tell, absolutely. But it wasn't nearly as nice as the Air Force base just a couple miles down the road. So the Air Force always gets the nice stuff.
That's because they never use it.
Yeah. You know, I might have had a brand new Xbox, but we still had sand in our lunches. So, oh well.
So we are past the top of the hour. I want to give people time for any last questions, but we should think about wrapping up. So before that, I just want to really thank Scott and Mark. Thank you for your time and for answering all of our questions. It's a very interesting project. And like I said, Shannon did drop the website in the chat. So I think we'll probably all spend a little time checking that out.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I'll put my my email in there so we have that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, all our contact information's on the website. The who we are. You know, you click on the region, whatever region you're looking at, our information comes up. My phone, the phone listed on there is my personal cell phone. You can contact me directly, text, phone, email, doesn't matter. I'm pretty available.
Yeah, no, we appreciate the opportunity to share our story with you. It's great. It gives us a lot more information to work on as well, and try to find ways to maximize what we do in so many ways. So it's very much appreciated.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you guys. Thank you so much. Looks like there's no final questions, but we'll reach out, and you guys are welcome to join us. We are taking a break for the summer, but if you ever want to come back, feel free to join us here. We'd love to hear more what you're doing and put in our 2 cents, as we're not shy.
Thanks. Okay. I appreciate that.
All right, everybody.
All right. Well, thanks. See you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
We're gonna wrap up. So